All right, back here with part three. We'll start with Millet, who's feeding right off of Courbet's sort of ideas on realism and the um, looking at sort of that peasant class. The short video there in the link is really good to sort of talk about Millet's work and what is known as the Barbizon School. This is a group of painters that moved to the countryside to work. Um, in the United States, we'll see a group that's very similar to that called the Regionalists. But the Barbizon School was really the first to leave the city, leave where the art galleries and the quote unquote art was taking place, and go out and into the countryside and sort of look at what's going on around them. This is showing the lowest of peasant life, right? The gleaners, those who are coming back and trying to pick the littlest, tiniest flakes of the grain that's left after they've gone through and already cut. So the gleaners, usually what would happen is after a field is cleared of sort of the wheat or the grains, what's being grown, and the majority has been taken and already taken off the chaff there, they would open the fields up so those could come back and look for any little grains left. So you're basically picking out grains of food amongst the dirt. Um, these works are inspired by the socialist writings of Marx, and Marx is calling for consideration of the social justice for all, that there's equality across all levels. So that's what's being seen, and a lot of people did not enjoy Millet's work because of this. Um, Thought he was maybe diving a little too deep into the working class, showing sort of a darker side of the world. A similar um, artist in the right is Daumier, and Daumier is, while he's not painting the poor class, he's still doing works about sort of the social injustices that are happening, and he uses a recent invention called lithography. And lithography is a process that is really sort of the basis of like oil and water. We know that they don't mix. So what they found is that you can take a limestone, Bavarian limestone specifically, and sort of grind it perfectly flat. And we still use this technology today in more classical trained schools. So I studied this technique when I was getting my master's in printmaking, and you can take these large stone slabs, grind them down smooth. Once that, you can use them pretty much forever, but they're heavy. And so you can draw onto the stone with a grease marker, and that grease then will only attract other oil-based substances. And so if you put water on that stone, that water sort of floats there on that surface, except where those greased lines are. And then you can take a roller that has oil ink, and when it's rolled over that oil ink only sticks to those greased lines. And then and the rest of the stone is still perfectly clean, and so then you can put that into a press and start printing off several copies of this. And what it allows you to do that's different than etching is, you notice these almost look like charcoal drawings, so it's very sort of distinct look, and you can draw freely right to the stone instead of having to worry about an etcher or an engraver, somebody with some other skills. So that's what he's using to make these. And he's making them in a time where France, you could be jailed or even killed for using the arts, whether it's music or visual or theater, writing, in a negative way against the government. So he's using printmaking to reach the masses, right? He wants to distribute these. These are meant to be in publications. These are meant to go out. He's not really thinking of them as sort of a financial means. And he was in prison often for his works. His favorite subjects were sort of the rich upper class that he mocked, much like Hogarth. And so he creates these ridiculous cartoons, and you can find tons of Daumier's work out there. I mean, that's why you realize he was in prison so much. But you'll see that. And this work shows a scene of history when a civil guard was shot and killed by a sniper during this while like repressing a worker uprising. And the shooter came from a very specific building. that, or at least where this building that they thought. And so the police went in and killed everybody in that building in retaliation. So what you're seeing is the retaliation of everyone dying, and and we see the aftermath of this innocence and this dead family. So we see the father on top of the child, trying to preserve it, but ends up everyone's shot and killed in the end. So it's this social injustice that he's trying to bring to light. Great video. Definitely watch this video. But Rosa Bonheur is just so prolific with her painting and her abilities, and she's got a great life. She's the most celebrated woman artist in the 19th century. She won so many awards. She held academic posts. Another female trained by her father. And really sort of helped break the mold for women artists. But she was known to dress like a man. Sometimes she was actually able to use that to her advantage to get into areas that only men seem to be able to get into. But was sort of known as this, and believed that she was a lesbian and all this sort of stuff. But she really sort of helps open the gates for how women are perceived in the art world, and this being her most famous piece. But she's got lots of works out there, and it's very predominant. So please watch the video on her. Now, back when we talked about the Enlightenment, we mentioned sort of the nude and that film on the nude, and how the nude is used to sort of like carry on a meaning. And I want to sort of say with a precursor here is that we're going to get into a lot of images that sort of seemingly objectify women, and there's sort of a double entente going, that the artist will purposely objectify women in their image to maybe bring some sort of discussion about it, and Manet is doing that for us here, where it just doesn't really make sense, anything in this work, and he's even copying previous master works. And when you think of things like the Rococo and sort of the rich and the lavishness, and so here we see the luncheon on the grass, and this is sort of a bridge between realism, right, and just painting an everyday scene. There's nothing that's over glorified, and then impressionism with the style that's going on, and a lot of expressionism. And expressionism will take on many forms, because by no means is this actually happening. This is not the scene that he saw. He's creating sort of an idealized image for us. So this work is now viewed as sort of this pivotal work for art history, because all these bridges that it supplies for artists to then freely work. And it was rejected from the Salon, or this art show that's very popular, in 1863, and became a part of the Salon de Refusés, which launched many artists' careers, because they were the avant-garde artists at the time. They weren't painting mainstream images. They wanted a challenge. So they're doing many things knowingly. They're using references to previous works. They're using styles in a very sort of impressionist or expressionistic way, very purposely. So this isn't just crazy people putting marks on a page. And he paints this sort of modern scene for the time, where we see two men engaging in conversation with one another, and a naked woman staring at us, right? This there's a woman, the second woman in the back doesn't even seem to be a part of it. It's almost like a cut and paste, not even engaged in what socially is going on. So this is no luncheon as one would see, because no one's even eating the food. The food's kind of discarded, kind of like the woman's clothes, just kind of like off in the corner. So there's a lot of things just don't really even make sense. What Manet is really doing is sort of making a collage of art imagery and styles and movements in one work, calling into question what art has been, or then even could be. He paints, showing the brushstroke, and doesn't refine the landscape or the individuals, so it's seen as very sort of crude. And these are all several reasons why it was sort of rejected from the canon, or sort of the standard for art at the time, but has become sort of this pivotal piece for us. And Manet continues to sort of challenge us with this more even scandalous image of Olympia. So we're using that odalisque, that reclining nude figure once again, and we have seen earlier by Titian. I referenced that, keep that image of Titian in mind, where we had the female right in the front, and we even had maidservants in the back. So he's stealing all these ideas from classical art, and this shows another nude sort of engaging the viewer as she's receiving this gift from a client. And it's very specific that we know that, instead of a dog, we have the cat on the right, right? We're so used to seeing sort of the dogs and the sort of fidelity, but here we have the cat. Um, he's actually using the same individual as last time from Luncheon on the Grass, so he's painting that same model again. And we see this huge bouquet of flowers that are coming in, to this individual. And so we know that she's sort of like shameless to her profession. In fact, she's kind of flaunting, and she's like, "Yes, I'm a prostitute. I know it, and this is my life, and I don't care." And so there's something very revealing to the public, when they're now, instead of us gazing at her, she's just kind of gazing back at us with sort of that judgment. Um, the idea of having sort of the maidservant being black was not new, but put together in the same composition as the only subjects, people actually really did hate this. So it sort of showed the racist tendencies also at the time. Manet's work continues to challenge the style set by the Academy in how he goes about composing everything here, and definitely take some time to watch the link there, because this is probably, if you had to put top 50 works of art that sort of changed art history, this would definitely be in that. Winslow Homer is really interesting. So we're going to jump to the United States here for the realism for a bit. And Winslow Homer's sort of leading that charge. His background was actually, he was an artist during the Civil War for Harper's Weekly, which is a newspaper, and he's actually on the battlefields drawing all these scenes from the Civil War and sending them back, and they're being engraved and printed, and you can still find lots of his engravings, eBay and things like that. But Harper's Weekly was where he got his start, and then but continues to use sort of the soldier throughout the rest of his a lot of his work for a time period. And here we see a painting of that where the soldier's thrown off his uniform. The war is just over, and he's thrown off that uniform, and we see it all lying down here in the corner. And the canteen and all that. And now he's going back to work. It's just like, well, this is done, and showing this idea and the shift from war to peace. So he's using a little bit more symbolism than somebody like Courbet, but it's still showing that that truth of the everyday. Also considered a realist and a major piece is Thomas Eakins and the Gross Clinic, and we've seen this before with like Rembrandt and him showing the dissection that's going on, but this is really depicting the reality of a sort of a human experience where we see this surgery in full detail. The doctor is there lecturing in the process. We can see the grandstand of people sort of observing, and you could even pay to actually come into these as a common individual. But we have artists and writers and people all around sort of taking in the note, and we have the mother actually down here can't even watch, right? She's sort of disgusted, and as he's talking about what's going on, but we even know more history about this because it is actually from life. And we know that the patient on the table actually suffers from a bone infection. And so they're, making that cut open and removing that dead piece of bone from that individual. And so it's kind of interesting for us to even, have that much information about it. Another one of my favorites, John Singer Sargent, just incredible. He's actually born in Italy, but he was an American expat. So he's raised kind of all over the world, but he did grow up in the United States, but studied in Paris, lived in London, and so he's sort of jumped around and versed. And he's most famous for his portraits, but and so what we see here are every single one of these girls, of these daughters of Edward Darley, has that sort of like unique characteristic. So even in this snapshot, he's able to capture, the individual emotion from each individual. Also going on is we do have African American artists. They definitely don't get a whole lot, but we're going to talk about Henry Ossawa Tanner here in the next part.